are these people?
We get to blame it on a Bibi. Are you ready? Are you ready to blame it on the bookie? I mean Bibi, Collin.
Sure.
So I brought Miss Catilin Johnstone, one of our favorites here, who seems to be able to say the things we think in a way that actually makes sense, and not just the jumble of words and emotions in our head. So she writes, blaming it all on Bibi. Coming under fierce attack for supporting genocide, the U.S. establishment has decided to blame it all on Netanyahu to insulate itself from further condemnation. Right? So they're really going to try to pin all the blame for the incineration of Gaza on Benjamin Netanyahu so that nothing has to change when this is over. The Western Empire has chosen a single scapegoat to carry away its sins so the status quo can march on unhindered by guilt or conscience. They want everyone to pin all the blame for Gaza genocide on Netanyahu, but this is not all the fault of Netanyahu. It's the fault of the entire Israeli state. It's the fault of Joe Biden. It's the fault of the Democrats. It's the fault of the Israeli supporters on Capitol Hill. It's the fault of the Western press. It's the fault of the Israel lobby. It's the fault of the unelected empire managers in U.S. government agencies. Is the fault of the entire U.S. empire and all its imperial member states like Australia, the UK, the EU, and Canada. But as you mentioned earlier, Collin, in your previous segment, education also is partly to blame, correct?
Correct.
So I wanted to bring the other side of the education coin. You saw how Israelis are more than willing to take away Palestinians' education, but what about their own people? What do you think? What do you think's happening there, Collin?
You've probably asked yourself, how does someone react to genocide? Like this.
With your babies here.
The answer is they've been conditioned to, and it starts in their education system. Here are 3 examples of how Israel teaches the dehumanization of Palestinians. According to this Israeli professor's research, Israeli textbooks show Palestinians, or Arabs as they're called, as caricatures of primitive farmers, hordes of refugees, or they're masked and painted as terrorists.
You cannot find one photograph of a human being who is a Palestinian.
And it might explain how you end up with videos like this.
We need to kill Arabs.
The way they are represented are as the problems and threats. And since they never or hardly ever meet Palestinians face to face or speak to them, although they may live 50 to 100 meters from them, this is what they know.
If you type map of Israel in Hebrew into Google, this is what you'll get. Notice how a lot of these maps have no clear markings showing the occupied West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, all of which are internationally recognized as illegally occupied Palestinian territories. You'll also find this map in Israeli textbooks. It's how you end up with illegal settlers colonizing more and more Palestinian land, claiming it's their God-given right.
This, all this, what you say, it's belong to Israel.
And it's how you end up with scenes like this.
You have this necklace?
That's Palestine, yeah.
This is Israel. Students in Israel are taught about the Holocaust starting in nursery school all the way to the 12th grade. Part of that learning is looking at horrifying images, or exercises that encourage students to put themselves in the shoes of the victims and relate to the experience. The identification of students with the victims isn't a coincidence. It's an intentional policy by the Israeli Ministry of Education. It's how you end up with a society where, according to one Israeli professor, every Jewish Israeli citizen is a Holocaust survivor or a potential victim of future Holocaust-like events.
The goal is traumatization and revenge, and not to let the fire of vengeance die out. However, this vengeance is not directed towards the German persecutors and their collaborators in Europe, but towards Palestinian colonized subjects who are Nazified.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bit that kills me.
I know.
It's the Germans, well, Europe,
yes,
were the ones that prosecuted you and victimize you, but then like you're taking it out on the Palestinians.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And like the cognitive dissonance of that, especially with the designers that I see online, it's just like it's almost like it doesn't compute with them that you should be your issue is Europe, really.
Yeah.
Not the Palestinians who you're essentially kind of taking their land from.
Yeah.
But anyway, God, you can continue.
Yes, I found this and it was like, oh, okay.
This vengeance is not directed towards the German persecutors and their collaborators in Europe, but towards Palestinian colonized subjects who are Nazified.
The fact that Palestinians had nothing to do with the Holocaust and that they are the ones currently being exterminated seems to be irrelevant. With this weaponization of the Holocaust, Zionism isn't seen for the settler colonial racist ideology that it is, but as the savior of the Jewish people. And it's this thinking and this fear that is weaponized to justify the violence of the Zionist state. That it must exist and do whatever is necessary to defend itself so that another Holocaust would never happen again. That's how you end up with videos like this.
It is a terrorist organization which murders Jews because they're Jews.
Once the Jewish people were defenseless, no longer.
So why does this matter? Israelis spent 12 years in this education system, teaching them to dehumanize Palestinians and see them as people looking to eliminate Jews, not an oppressed, colonized people looking for freedom. And once they graduate, most Jewish Israelis will go straight to the military to do their 2 to 3 years of mandatory service, where they become the front lines of apartheid and occupation. That's how we end up with videos like this. So why do all this? Well, Israel can only exist as a Jewish state if it manages demographics to maintain a Jewish majority. And it does so by displacing, imprisoning, and murdering Palestinians routinely. And the only way to get Jews to participate in this is by convincing them that it's the only way for them to exist safely. Seeing Palestinians as people who want to live in peace and be free doesn't fit into that plan. Subscribe for more and support us on Patreon.
So, any questions?
Who is this from?
Uncivilized.
Okay.
Yep. So you can find them. They're around, but
not
anything...
questions, but yeah, I have something I want to say.
Please.
Actually, I'm gonna wait because I lost the train of thought. But I'll get back to it, I'm sure.
Okay. Well, Catilin continues by trying to make this mass atrocity solely the fault of Netanyahu and not the giant sprawling network of immensely powerful institutions which made it possible. They're working to ensure that no changes will need to be made to any of those institutions. It's just like how they made a scapegoat of Judith Miller for the entire mass media's war propaganda in the lead up to the Iraq invasion and let all the blame for the war hang on Bush before completely rehabilitating Bush's image during the Trump administration and deciding he's a pretty great guy after all. No meaningful changes were ever made to ensure that U.S. power alliance never repeats its horrible crimes after Iraq, which is why it keeps repeating horrible crimes. The trouble with Israeli apologia on Gaza is that at first glance its talking points sound legit if you don't know much about Israel-Palestine, like Israel has the right to defend itself, or they need to get rid of Hamas because of October 7th, etc. It would sound entirely reasonable if you didn't know that Israel is a settler colonialist apartheid state who has been murdering, abusing, and stealing from indigenous population of the land for generations. The amount of energy needed to see through the talking points is far greater than the amount of energy needed to speak them. It's one of those, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth even gets its pants on kind of deals. Which is why it's miraculous that so many people around the world are getting educated enough to see through the lies and support the Palestinians. How are they getting educated enough? Mostly through online content, which sums up the situation quickly and concisely enough for them to understand easily. That's the only way the truth can move quickly enough to catch up with the lies, and that's the role TikTok has played here, which is why we've seen Israel lobbyists and the ADL shrieking their lungs out about it for months. Saying TikTok must be suppressing pro-Israel content because pro-Palestinian content is more popular is like saying they're suppressing flat earth content because round earth content is more popular. Pro-Israel content is just less popular in general, which is why the gap is the same on Facebook and Instagram. The US government is like, no, it's not censorship. We're just using state power to ensure that popular speech platforms are only allowed to exist if they can be controlled by US government agencies. Forgotten in all this is the news that Israel literally tortured UN staff to extract false statements about UNRWA having Hamas connections. They tortured UN staff. If we had anything remotely like objective news reporting in the Western press, this would have been the top story everywhere for days.
I mean, honestly, if we were on our P's and Q's in independent media, that should also be news too.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, I figured I remembered what I wanted to say.
Okay.
It's amazing that after all of this is said and done, like, I think for me, just basically as a Black man, you know, and knowing my history, I'm able to kind of sympathize with other oppressed people easily. Like, in terms of, you know, even just as recently as my grandparents, what they had to, like, my parents were not that far out from slavery themselves. They were about maybe, I think at best, about 40 years out from abolition of slavery in the Caribbean. But even then, you can argue they were still more pretty much enslaved. The plantation still existed even to the point when my dad was alive.
Angola,
Angola.
No, I'm just saying it's yes, but plantations still exist. They're just renamed prisons now.
But it's like, with everything that's going on, and I think you said this before on another stream, it's almost giving Israel another justification to feel safe, given how, you know, they're not winning the PR war right now. Like, and basically it's gotten to the point where people hate Israel because they're being identified, they're being exposed for what they are. And so I kind of am fear of that because it's going to give more. I think you've seen the doubling down now in terms of, oh, people hate Israel because of, you know, XYZ. So it's more of a reason for us to have our need for safety, which in turn is going to affect Palestinians more. And I've been wondering, it's like, what kind of conversations can you have with Israelis and Zionists in general who can kind of break that propaganda that has been force-fed to them? In terms of how to see that this is not a fight that you should be looking to, given your religion, assuming that you are Jewish.
Well, see, that's
given the history that we've kind of reported on here, that a lot of this is based on European colonialism and imperialism that has warped your religion in order to think and respond in the way that you do. And so I just feel like right now it's just becoming more ramped up in terms of having Israelis feel that they're feeling less safe now. And we've seen this online, like they say, complain. They're seeing all the protests. They're seeing like people being very negative about Israel. And they're kind of like, oh, I still don't feel safe. So it gives more of a justification of what's happening to Palestinians now. So I think for me, that's kind of the frustrating part, is because like we're not moving away from it. If anything, we're accelerating the issue in terms of what's happening in Palestine right now. Is giving them more of a justification to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because of the world's stance against Israel right now.
Well, you reminded me about the religious side of this, where I've, you know, full disclosure, I've been an atheist for a long time, right? Partly due to, speakers who talked about those subjects, Richard Dawkins, Stephen Fry, Carl Sagan and the like, right? Where are they at? Stephen Fry right now, big supporter of Israel. Like, why does he not speak about religions as a whole? It's only one that's an issue. Like, that's this kind of stuff that frustrates me now, where I feel like a lot of the movements that would have pushed back on this have been co-opted, controlled, manipulated, and are now comfortable and safe. They have their ivory towers to live in now, and they don't need to see the same problems elsewhere. So yeah, but I definitely wanted to bring, I don't think anyone's talked about the other side of the education system on this. So I felt like it was important for that to, like, did you know about they're teaching kids about that stuff in like literally your kids' age, the ones you teach.
I didn't know that they were teaching them so young, but I'm not surprised by it either. I mean, look at here. Like, I was sharing this with Indy, I think, last weekend. Night is required reading generally by Elie Wiesel, like in most high schools in this country. I've read Night several times in middle school and high school. So
well, and that's the thing too.
Like I say this, like in school, like I learned the whole, and again, it's valid given the oppression, but I learned the Holocaust up the ass. Like I knew nothing regarding, my experience in Africa other than like slaves, and the only things that I learned outside of that was because of my dad.
Yeah.
And then like any research that I had to do on my own.
For me, I grew up in the Southern school system where they still teach about the Holocaust. That was a whole, I swear, 2 weeks long, lesson every year, right? Versus no talks of Emmett Till, or, it was like you might have gotten Black History Month, you might have gotten a segment or two, but none of the actual revolutionaries that actually did. No Malcolm X, no, Nat Turner, no, you know what I mean? Like none of those were coming up. So,
right.
And a lot of what we did wasn't talked about either. So that was kind of, like we read some story where someone sang a spiritual and, that was about it. And we moved on. So, like, there's definitely issues with education in this country too on that, which is why you see a lot of the problems you see now with Americans not being able to see through propaganda, which is why they want to control any of the education systems outside of that, like TikTok, like whatever, and they're running it under the guise of responsible stewardess of social media. Like, you need to be able to control these places of fake news and conspiracy. Otherwise, you're going to miseducate people. And it's like, well, you're not educating them fucking well either. So, I'd rather them take the gamble elsewhere. So let them figure it out. But yeah, and I definitely think they're trying to blame it all on one group again and letting that.
Right. Well, well, let's get to Bibi for a second, because it's easy to target one person. We do it with Trump.
Yeah.
Like, constantly. Or any Republican official constantly. Hell, they do it to Democrats too.
Yeah.
But we don't talk about the root issue. The root issue is Zionism. You get rid of Bibi, you're just going to get another person like him, if not worse, who's just going to continue the project.
This was happening.
It's been happening.
Under different administrations in Israel.
It's just like people think that this all started because of Bibi. Granted, he's been in power pretty much for as long as we've been alive.
We just had him out. He just got reelected, really. Like, we had a different guy in there for a while. So
but again, like, he's only been in power since the 80s.
Yeah.
So this has been happening up, and I'm going to make this argument. This whole thing has been happening since the turn of the century. This thing has been in motion.
Yep. More with the Balfour and the and what's the other,
even before that.
What's the other conference about Africa?
Berlin.
That's it. Yeah. So
so this has been in motion for over 100 years.
Yeah, this is League of Nations, this is all that crap.
Right. So this is not a recent thing. And even Bibi, this is not a him thing. This is an ideological idea that has been crafted among people with money and power that were educated enough to know how to accomplish their goal, and they were willing to wait long term, kind of like a lot of our right wingers here. Were willing to wait long term until they got what they wanted, and still are looking to wait long term to be able to get what they want.
Very easy for particular political members here to go, once they deal with either get a ceasefire or get Netanyahu out, like you saw Chuck Schumer trying to say things like that they need to run elections, right? It allows for, if those things then do happen, they count it as a win and run with it as a talking point, you know, and you'll see Biden going, see, I saved the democracy, and, you know, it'll be rhetorical bullshit, because we all know the problem didn't fix itself, it just went away. So
I think the difference is Bibi is just basically like, kick rocks.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I'm going to do anyway, and
until you
will
kick me the fuck out.
Much. And even then, that's not justified, because how can we kick him out and still give money to Israel?
Yeah.
So he already has our money. So and that's the problem. Like the aid is unconditional. It's not based on any tangibles at all. It's just, it's Israel, it's an ally, so we're just going to naturally give them money. So the idea of Bibi being the scapegoat, I think, is very convenient for them, but I don't think it's going to work in terms of...
Who's to say if we want to world police that side of the thing too, and then occupy Israel ourselves? Like, we're building a fucking nice little pier over there so we can drop boots off if we want to, you know? Like, if they want to continue, they just switch occupiers. It's the same business developers who are going to make the money. Why do they care who, you know, is the figurehead? So lots of things can happen between now and elections and after elections, and what, you know, who knows what Trump's willing to do too. He's friend of AIPAC as well. So we'll see, you know, but yeah. You know, it's one of the reasons why we're demonetized, which, you know, you can always choose to help us in other ways at ko-fi.com/indie news network. We're making this little goal right there for equipment for people go up. So yeah, and if you can't support us monetarily, you can also support us by liking and subscribing, sharing to help beat the suppression, and commenting to let us know what you think. But yeah,